Welcome this morning. Glad that you're here. First off, right off the bat, I have to say this. Congratulations to the Punishers who won the dodgeball tournament this past week. Both of them are sitting up here on the front row. The real ones, the real team players up here. Man, they humiliated us for sure. It was a crazy thing. We had dodgeball in here. It was really fun this past week. We'll do that again in the spring. Keep your ears open for that. If this is your first time this morning, we want to welcome you to Overflow. This is our family, our family gathering. And speaking of that, we won't be here next week. We won't be meeting in this place next week. So if you're here in town next week, please join us at our South Campus, which is at 98th in Indiana. The bus will still run. So if you're still on campus, the bus will still pick you up and take you to the South Campus rather than this campus. And by the way, in case you didn't know, we do have a shuttle that meets out in front of the sub every Sunday, and it leaves by 10:40. And so if you're there by 10:40, you should be good to go if you want to save some gas or if you want to, whatever. So all that to say, we're so glad that you're here. Thanksgiving is this next week, and I'm really excited about that because anything dealing with food, I'm always excited about, let's face it. But it's up to me this year to cook the turkey, so I could really use some prayers on this because this is my first time. And anyway, we won't go there. But all that to say, we're really going to miss you guys next week. If you're going home to your families, take advantage of that time to really just be rested up and relax yourselves from studying and from school and work or whatever, and just enjoy being home with your family. But don't get too comfortable. We want to see you back here the following Sunday. If you are new to Overflow this morning, we do ask that you fill out one of those connection cards in front of you, and or you can follow along on the app this morning through the scriptures. We have that all there too. You can sign up. You can actually give us all your information on the app as well, and you can check that out. It's Overflow IABC is the app that you can download. So, all that to say, this next week is Thanksgiving, and I don't know about you, but I'm ready for a break. I'm ready to spend time with my family and really just pause and give thanks. And I want to challenge you guys as you go home, as you go to your families or wherever you spend Thanksgiving. Maybe you're here, maybe you can't go home. I just want to challenge you to take a step back and view Thanksgiving as it was meant to be celebrated, which is being thankful for everything God has given you. Every single thing. And a lot of times, I don't know about you, but with me, I tend to overlook the simple things that I need to give thanks for. I mean, it's good to give thanks for the big things, and it's easy to give thanks to God for the big things, but sometimes it's the simple things that really matter most to me that I really just don't ever thank God for. You know, like this morning, my little daughter, she's 4 years old. She made me breakfast in bed. This is the second time this week. I'm doing something right. And it wasn't anything big. It was just a Pop-Tart. But still, it was breakfast in bed. And, she's very thoughtful. And I'm so thankful for her. I'm so thankful that I get to be a dad to her, that I get to, raise her up. And I've got 3 of these little girls, and I don't know how I'm going to do it. I really need your prayers in this. All that to say, if you're big and you have a gun or if you have muscles, I could really use you to stand out in front of my house like this when they bring their first date home. Mark, will you be there? Highway patrolman right here in the front row. Thank you. So, but I'm thankful for all these things. It's easy to be thankful for things that are big, like our salvation or our freedom in this country or things like that, things that we're always thankful for. But I think it's really difficult sometimes to look at the things that may be even difficult in your life right now and be thankful for those things. You know, it's hard to be thankful in trials, and it's hard to be thankful when life is hard, and yet we're called to give thanks in any and every situation. And so sometimes I get in this rut of negative thinking, and maybe you're there with me too. But sometimes I get in this rut or this valley of being negative, and it's like this morning, I hope if you're in that place, my desire is that you leave here so encouraged to be thankful for the trials and the tribulation, the testing of your faith if you're going through that right now. To be thankful in the hard times, to be thankful in the good times. This is what we need to be doing. It's hard to be thankful in those moments of trials, but you got to realize God is allowing you to go through some of those things because He wants you to be strengthened, and He's refining you. He's growing you. Anytime you grow, it's not fun. Anytime God stretches your faith, it's not fun. Anytime you're struggling in life, or maybe it's struggling in school or struggling in a relationship and keeping your life together, maybe you're just hanging on by a thread, you need to be thankful for those times because God's allowing you to go through those things for a purpose. I'm a very negative person sometimes, and I don't voice that often. But in the back of my mind, I'm so negative, and I got to get rid of those things. We had a staff retreat this past week, and it was at my house. We had our staff over for Friday lunch, and we talked through this. And I was surprised to hear some of the same things that I'm struggling with, our staff is struggling with. And so it was just a good time to be refreshing, to be a time of refreshment and encouragement for all of us as we thank God for what He's done. But I don't know about you, but sometimes I get in this rut of negativity, and I get wrapped up in that, or I find myself in this valley. And I'm not the only one. You're not the only one. We see this all through Scripture. People, godly people, that have struggled, that have overcome things, but they've struggled in some of the same ways that you and I do. And this morning, as we look in the rest of chapter 11, Hebrews chapter 11, we're going to see this. We're going to see how these men finished well, how these people finished well. And this is an encouragement for you and me this morning. If your faith is faltering, or maybe your faith is stagnant, and you're here this morning and you're wondering why can't I just get on the right track? I mean, sometimes I think to myself, what is wrong with me? I'm a pastor. I shouldn't be feeling these ways. I shouldn't be thinking these thoughts. And maybe you find yourself in that same way too. But all these things that we ought to be thankful for, even in the hard times, even in the trials, we got to realize that these trials are building up for us something yet future. There is a promise beyond this life. There is something greater beyond our temporary existence here on earth. You are temporary in your existence here on earth. Your time here is temporary. We know that. But I think sometimes when we think about how short life is, when we think about, and maybe you're not there yet, but I'm getting to that age where I'm like, man, it just seemed like yesterday that my 7-year-old daughter was born, and it seems like yesterday that she was just learning how to walk and to talk, and she got out of diapers, and now she's in first grade. It's just crazy. And I start thinking about, man, this is so crazy how life is going so fast. And maybe you're not there yet, but man, when I start thinking about these things, it's kind of depressing actually, because I go, man, I really got to focus in. Like this time is just so important with my daughters. It's so important with my wife. I won't have my wife forever. That's such a hard thing to wrap my mind around, that I won't have my family like this forever. Everything that we have is temporary in this earth. And I think sometimes we come to the table thinking that, that's so far off, or that's never going to happen to me. I will never lose my family, or I'll never lose the people that matter most to me. But you never know what may happen. We're not guaranteed tomorrow. And all that to say, maybe you've lost someone close to you, and maybe this is going to be a hard Thanksgiving for you. But let's rejoice in the time that we had with those folks around us. As I think about several of you in the audience, I know some of you have lost your parents. You've lost loved ones. You've lost grandparents, maybe even brothers and sisters. And that's hard. That's difficult. It's easy to get wrapped up in the sorrow and the things like that. But as I was talking with Seth this past week, he said, I'm thankful for the time that I had with both of my parents who are now passed. I thought, man, what a powerful statement. He's looking beyond this temporary existence here on this planet, looking forward to the home that we have. And this is where the author of Hebrews goes in chapter 10. Let me just refresh your mind here. In chapter 10, verse 32, it says this. The author of Hebrews says, remember those earlier days after you had received the light, when you stood your ground in the great contest in the face of suffering. Sometimes you were publicly exposed to insult and persecuted. At other times you stood side by side with those who were so treated. You sympathized with those in prison and joyfully accepted the confiscation of your property because you knew that you yourselves had a better and lasting possession. Talking about the kingdom of heaven, talking about paradise, talking about there's something more beyond this life. There is a hope that is beyond this temporary existence. You had your mindset on the right place, and they were not looking at the temporary thing, the surface level. They were looking far beyond that into eternity. They didn't care what God did to them. They didn't care if God took their property, or God took their lives, or God took their money. It didn't matter because their hearts were focused on the right place. And I think this is a season for me to get refocused on the right things, the things that matter the most. And maybe God's calling you to that too. It's crazy when you think about this. Just think about your life for a second. And a few weeks ago I talked about this. Most of you had no idea what I was talking about. Let me just explain it a little bit differently. Remember those 3D prints that we used to, you remember the books that used to open up? It's called Magic Eye or something like that. It was an illusion. Nod your head if you remember. Okay, about half of you do. All the freshmen are like, what? You don't know. There were these books. Let me just explain it to you. There were these books that you would open it up and there would be a picture there. Except it didn't look like a picture. It just looked like someone threw up on the page. It was just random stuff, random colors, random splotches. But if you focused your eyes the right way, in other words, if you look past that drawing or that image and just focused your eyes past that, you would see this image, this 3D image pop off the page. And it was just amazing. Maybe it was like a globe, like a world, or maybe it was a rainbow. I don't know. Maybe it was a unicorn. I don't know. But those were like all the rage back in the 90s. And I know most of you were born in the late 90s, and so I recognize that I'm dating myself, but still, the same truth applies even now. They were looking beyond. Whenever we would open that book up and look at those things, you had to look beyond the temporary. You had to look beyond what was right in front of you, and you would see the image. You would see these things pop off the page. And it's just crazy. This is the same thing. This is the same idea that we see this morning. These people that this book was written to, they had their minds focused on what was further down the line. Have you ever been to the mountains and you see the peaks, the mountain peaks, valleys? You can't really see the valleys, but you can see the peaks. Sherry and I backpacked into Olympic National Park several years ago, back before we had kids, when we used to have a lot of fun. I'm kidding. We're having fun now. But there's this one place, if you drive into Olympic National Park, you drive into the main entrance, there's this beautiful place, and it's called Hurricane Ridge. And you can look over the valley. It's the most photographed place in that part of the United States, and it's so beautiful. You can see ridges, mountaintops, just for, it seems like forever. And there's light blue, darker blue, darker blue, darker blue as the mountains, fade away. But what's so cool about that is I almost see this as being the same thing. These people had their minds set on what was further down the road, what was further down the path, which is the mountaintops, the promises. The promises. They couldn't see the valleys. They couldn't see the several valleys that we've been through, that maybe they've been through too. But there's a greater and lasting possession. There's a greater and lasting promise that is in the kingdom of heaven. This is our home. This place is not our home, but there's a greater home. There's a lasting home in the kingdom of heaven, in paradise. And so this temporary life is just fleeting. And if we have our minds set on the right things, if we're thankful even for the little things, if we're thankful for the troubles and the tribulations that we go through, we're going to keep our minds on the right thing. We're going to keep our minds on the mountain peaks. We're going to see the promise that lies ahead. This is our hope. This is why we were saved. God keeps his promises. He's so faithful. I'm so grateful for that. I did a wedding last night. Charlene and Colton, Francis, they got married last night. They were a part of this ministry for the past several years, and they graduated and moved on, but they came back to Lubbock last night to get married, and it was just so cool. You got to see it from my perspective sometime, on stage, in front of all these people, performing a covenant between two people and God. It's so cool. It's such an honor to be a part of that. But God keeps his promises, and he expects them, husband and wife, to keep their promises to each other and to him as well. But God has such an amazing promise for us, and he will never break it. There's a promise coming. And as we read this today, I want you to keep in mind that these men were working, they were laboring, they were walking this path of life just like you and I were. They strayed off the path sometimes. Yes, they were faithless sometimes. Yes, they stumbled and fell just like you and I do. Yes, they struggled with some of the same things that you and I do. But they found a way to get back on the right path, and they found a way to be thankful. They found a way to follow Jesus with their hearts, and they finished well. Listen to this. We talked about Abel last week. We talked about Enoch and then Abraham. And this morning, we'll pick up in chapter 11, verse 13. It says, all these people were still living by faith when they died. They did not receive the things promised. They only saw them and welcomed them from a distance. And in my mind, I just think about, man, what it's like to hike through the mountains and see the glacier peaks of Mount Olympus in the background, and see the valleys that go down into the ridges that go down into this valley, and see the next mountain peak, and see the next mountain peak beyond that. We saw these things from a distance. They saw Jesus from a distance. They couldn't see the valleys, but they could see the promises yet lying ahead, and they welcomed them from a distance. And they admitted that they were aliens and strangers on earth, just like you and I are. Verse 14. People who say such things show that they are looking for a country of their own. If they had been thinking of the country they had left, they would have had the opportunity to return. Instead, they were longing for a better country, a heavenly one. Therefore, God is not ashamed to be called their God, for he has prepared a city for them. Check this out. He picks up again and talks about Abraham. He says, by faith, Abraham, when God tested him, offered Isaac as a sacrifice. He who had received the promises was about to sacrifice his one and only son, even though God had said to him, it was through your son Isaac that your offspring will be reckoned. Abraham reasoned that God could raise the dead, and figuratively speaking, he did receive Isaac back from death. By faith, Isaac, Abraham's son, blessed Jacob and Esau, his sons, in regard to their future. By faith, Jacob, when he was dying, blessed each of Joseph's sons and worshiped as he leaned on the top of his staff. By faith, Joseph, when his end was near, spoke about the Exodus and the Israelites from Egypt and gave instructions about his bones. He was basically prophesying about what would happen after his death. His people, his descendants would become enslaved, and yet he knew that they would be set free, that God would set them free. By faith, Moses' parents hid him for 3 months after he was born because they saw that he was no ordinary child, and they were not afraid of the king's edict. Verse 24 says, by faith, Moses, when he was grown up, refused to be known as the son of Pharaoh's daughter. He chose to be mistreated along with the people of God rather than to enjoy the pleasures of sin for a short time. He regarded disgrace for the sake of Christ as of greater value than the treasures of Egypt, because he was looking ahead to his reward. I love this because as we're reading, I'm just thinking about these stories of these people that are just ordinary people. You know, and as he talks about Abraham, my mind goes, I don't know about you, but I've always kind of assumed that Abraham was so faithful when God tells him to take his son up to the mountain and sacrifice him, that he was just so faithful. I mean, he's Abraham, for crying out loud. He's the father of many nations. You know, this is Abraham. So of course he's going to be faithful. I don't know if I could do that. But Abraham was a man just like you and me. He was a person just like you and me. He had some of the same struggles. He had some of the same doubts of God. He had some of the same issues that you and I struggle with. Yet he trusted God. His faith was strong, and through that his faith became stronger. When I think about guys like Moses, who killed a man. Here's a man that killed a man. He's guilty of murder. The scriptures talk about this. And yet he overcame some of these things, and he's now considered one of the greatest of the people of the Bible, you know? And yet all of these people, they were living by faith. They were looking beyond the here and now. They were looking beyond the temporary. Yes, they had struggles. Yes, they fell off the wagon at times. Yes, they struggled in areas, but they got back on the right path with the Lord, and they finished well. Listen to this. Verse 29 says, by faith, the people of Egypt, the people of Israel, passed through the Red Sea on dry land. But when the Egyptians tried to do so, they were drowned. By faith, the walls of Jericho fell after the people had marched around them for 7 days. By faith, the prostitute Rahab, because she welcomed the spies, was not killed with those who were disobedient. And what more shall I say? I do not have time to tell you about Gideon, Barak, Samson, Japheth, David, Samuel, and the prophets, who through faith conquered kingdoms, administered justice, and gained what was promised, who shut the mouths of lions, quenched the fury of the flames, escaped the edge of the sword, whose weakness was turned to strength, and who became powerful in battle and routed foreign armies. Women received back their dead, raised to life again. Others were tortured and refused to be released so that they might gain a better resurrection. Some faced jeers and flogging, while others were chained and put in prison. They were stoned. They were sawed in half. They were put to death by the sword. They went about in sheepskin and goatskin, destitute, persecuted, and mistreated. The world was not worthy of them. Wow. That's crazy. I love how he words that. He talks about people throughout the history of the earth, throughout the history of humanity, have been undergoing persecution because of their faith in God, because they stood their ground knowing that it might cost them something. And then he goes on and he talks about it's going to cost you something. Some of these people gave it all, knowing that there's a better resurrection after this one. After I die, after I've been raised to life in Jesus, there's a better resurrection yet coming. And it's a physical resurrection of this body that will never, this body will never die or age or fade again. It will be resurrected and live forever. There's a greater and lasting resurrection. These people gave it all. Some of them were killed by the sword. Some of them were persecuted. Some of them were made fun of. Some of them were put to death by the sword or sawn in half. And yet they gave it all because they had their mind set on the right thing. They had their mind set on the promises that lie ahead. This is why we should give thanks. Not focus on the temporary. Not focus on the here and now necessarily, the struggles, the trials, the tribulation. There's something greater beyond this life. There is. And I love how he words this. The world was not worthy of them. That's crazy. I want that to be said about me. Not as a selfish thing, not as a prideful thing, but I want my life to look so much like Jesus that I'm not, it's not evident that I am not of this place. I want everybody to know that this place is not my home. This planet, this world, this country is not my own. That we have a greater and lasting possession in the kingdom of heaven. These are the promises that we have. These are the promises that we cling to. I want my life to look so much like Jesus, so selfless like Jesus, and that is so hard to do, and I'm so far from it, and I know it. But I want this to be said about me, that the world was not worthy of me, and I want that to be said about you, that the world was not worthy of you. This world is broken. This world is full of garbage and sin, destruction and sorrow and wickedness. I mean, you turn on the channel and just watch the news for a little while. You'll see it. I mean, you'll see the murders. You'll see the robberies, the rapes, all these things happening right here in Lubbock. You turn on the national news, you'll see things that are going on around the world, things, atrocities that I can't even speak about from this stage, happening to little children, little girls, little boys. The beheading of our brothers and sisters around the world, our fellow Christians, being put to death, being tortured. And when I think about the faith that they have compared to my own, I got a lot of work to do. I don't know if you've been keeping up with that, but I almost feel powerless. How do I help my brothers and sisters in Syria and Iraq and Turkey? How do I help them? I think the one thing that we can do is pray for them. Maybe we can do that today. Pray for them. Give them strength to overcome. Listen, Jesus says, if the world hated me, it's going to hate you too. If the world put Jesus to death, it's going to try to put you to death. The world stoned Paul. Other disciples, it's going to try to stone you too. It's going to try to take advantage of you. It's going to steal, kill, and destroy who you are and what you stand for. But we got to stand our ground. We got to stand up for what's right, what's holy, what's pure. And in that moment, when you stand your ground in your faith, whether it be in class or with friends or with family or whatever, in that moment when you say, all that matters to me is Jesus, in that moment when you say, oh, I don't care about anything else. I don't care about job or money or security. All that matters to me is Jesus. When you focus your eyes on the promises that lie ahead, nothing else matters. And maybe that's our problem. We've taken our eyes off Jesus. And this morning, we got to refocus our eyes on him because he is our promise. There's something coming. There's something greater yet coming. The world will deceive you. And I'm just amazed. I was watching TV last night in bed, and I'm just amazed at simple things that the world says is right, that are obviously not right. And they stand on the ground of, well, how do we know you're right and I'm wrong? You know, and they stand the ground on what's right for you may not be right for me. And, well, scientifically, this is proven this way, and scientifically, this is proven this way, and I don't care about anything other than truth, absolute truth, absolute truth, and there is one. And we read in these pages the absolute truth. The absolute truth is there is a God. There's only one God. I am a sinful person. I need Jesus. I can't do anything on my own outside of Jesus. I can't work my way into heaven. There's nothing good enough that I can do to get to heaven. There's nothing that I can do to work my way out of salvation. Once I have Jesus, I have him. Once I'm in the family of God, I'm in the family of God. There's nothing I can do to run away from Jesus. His reach is far greater than the length that I could run. That's the promise that we have. There's more promises. There's greater promises. The world is not worthy of us. That's what I want to be told when we stand in front of Jesus. The world was not worthy of you because you stood up for what was right. You stood up against what was wrong. The world loves death. The world loves violence. The world loves all these things. But you loved life. You loved people. You stood your ground for what was right. I want to finish this race well. Listen to this. The world was not worthy of them. Them who gave their lives, them who were mistreated. They wandered in deserts and mountains and in caves and holes in the ground. Now check this out. I love this final verse because it speaks such volumes of truth. It says, these were all commended for their faith. These were all commended. They did such a good job of finishing well. Yet none of them had received what had been promised. That's crazy. Even in death, they did not receive what had been promised. There's a greater promise yet to come for all of us. And listen, he says this. He says, God had planned something better for us, so that only together with us would they be made perfect, would they be made whole or complete, not lacking anything. This is the Greek word teleos. It means complete, mature, lacking nothing. God had planned something better for us, so that only together with us, with these people that we just read about, these people, the people of chapter 11, who lived by faith, God has planned something better for us, so that only together with us would they be made perfect, whole, mature, not lacking anything. Therefore, since we're surrounded by such a great cloud of witnesses, let us throw off everything that hinders and the sin that so easily entangles, and let us run with perseverance the race marked out for us. Let us fix our eyes on Jesus, the author and perfecter of our faith, who for the joy set before him endured the cross, scorning its shame, and sat down at the right hand of the throne of God. Consider him who endured such opposition from sinful men, so that you will not grow weary and lose heart. In your struggle against sin, you have not resisted to the point of shedding your blood. We'll pick up here next week. But I just love this, and I would be doing a disservice to you if I stopped right there in chapter 11. Chapter 12 is the complete thought. Therefore, since we are surrounded by such a great cloud of witnesses, these men, these women who gave it all because they kept their eyes on Jesus, let's follow suit. Let's cast off everything that's holding us back. Casting off everything, laying it aside, looking from unto the place that we are, looking beyond the temporary into the eternal. This is what this means. Let us fix our eyes on Jesus. Looking from unto. Let's keep our eyes on Jesus. We've got to run our race well. It's been marked out for us. There's one man that marked it out for us, Jesus. Jesus walked the straight and narrow path. He never sinned once. He was tempted in every way that we are. And as we saw earlier in this semester, Jesus is our great high priest. He has been tempted in every way that you have, and yet he found a way to overcome. And he's able to sympathize with you. He's able to understand your burdens. He's able to understand your struggles and how difficult it is to keep on that straight and narrow path. But he walked it. And it's straight because he's perfect. And it's narrow because one man was the only one that was able to walk it. The race has been marked out for us. If you're off the path, let's get back on. Plain and simple. Let today be the day that you get back on the right path. Let today, don't walk out of these doors without getting back on this right path. And I understand I am the same way. Tomorrow I might be right back off the path again. But today, I'm going to choose to stay the straight and narrow. Today, I'm going to walk this path. I'm going to try to finish well, because if death comes tonight, if I die tonight, I want to finish well. That's the simple truth. Let me close by saying this. Hebrews 6 says this. We desire that each one of you show the same diligence, so as to realize the full assurance of hope until the end, that you may not be sluggish, but imitators of those who through faith and patience inherit the promises. The promises that we, together with these people in chapter 11, are striving for is this kingdom that's yet to come. It's the kingdom that Jesus will bring someday when he's crowned king in heaven at the wedding banquet, when he's united with his bride, and together they come back and everything is restored back like it was from the very beginning. When Adam lost everything, when Adam sinned, when Adam and Eve sinned, they lost everything. And right now we're in the pattern, or we're in this process of restoring or being restored back to that perfect place. And Jesus is coming to restore all things new. These are the promises in which we're looking towards. When sin will be no more, when death will be no more, there is one King. His name is Jesus, and we will worship him. We will serve alongside him. We will get to serve with him. We'll get to lead with him in that place. This is the hope. This is the promises that the ancients were committed for, but we all together with them are being made perfect. And these are the promises that we need to keep our eyes on. I want you to see these things. I tell you these things because I want you to keep your mind on what's important. I want you to keep your hearts focused on the right things. Because right now you may be in a sluggish place. You may be in a stagnant faith. And God's not okay with that. He wants you near him. And the coolest thing that I can tell you about God is as soon as you turn and run towards God, he's there. He is right there with arms wide open. I promise you. He's like a father. He is a father. Anytime one of my daughters does something wrong and I have to spank them, yes, we do that in our house. Very lightly. Anytime we discipline our children, it's so beautiful to see this. They turn right back around and give me a hug with tears streaming down their face. They just want to say sorry. I'm sorry I let you down. And they just wrap their arms around me, and it's such a heartbreaking thing for me to see, and I just wrap my arms around them too. This is the Father that we have in heaven. When you're ready to stop running, when you're ready to turn back to him, his arms are wide open, ready to receive you. You can count on that. This morning, I don't know where you're at. I don't know what you're going through. But this morning, I want to encourage you to lay some things down, to not leave this room the same way that you came in. I'll be in the back. I'll be in the prayer room. I'd love to pray with you. I'd love to talk with you. If there's something you're going through, if there's a struggle, maybe you just need prayer for, we've got other people back there that would love to pray with you. But this time, as the band comes up, we're going to take this seriously. As we worship these next 3 songs together, as we sing these songs to God, allow God to point out some things in your life. Allow God to speak truth to your life. Let's pray.